There's a moment, usually late at night, when everything finally goes quiet. The phone stops buzzing, the TV flickers into black, even the street outside falls asleep, and in that silence, something shifts. It's like the world has gone still, just long enough for a man to hear the one thing he spends his whole life trying to avoid: himself. I used to think I hated noise, that the chaos outside was the enemy. But the truth? It was silence I feared, because silence reveals. It peels off the masks I wear during the day, the confident smile, the casual jokes, the easy answers. It strips away the noise I use to fill the spaces inside me. Silence doesn't lie. It shows me what I've hidden, what I've buried, what I've refused to name. And when that happens, when everything quiets down, I don't feel peace, feel exposed, naked, alone. There's a specific kind of terror that grows in silence, a soft, slow ache. It doesn't scream, it whispers, and its voice sounds a lot like mine, only older, more tired, more honest. It asks me questions I can't answer. Who are you when no one's watching? Do you even like the man you've become? And the worst one, what are you trying so hard to distract yourself from? If you're a man, you probably know this silence, not the peaceful kind, the kind that creeps in like a fog and makes you feel like you're suffocating in your own skin. We've been taught that silence is golden, that real men don't speak unless necessary, that stillness is strength. But what if we got it wrong? What if silence isn't strength, but exile? What if we fear silence because it forces us to confront the one person we were never taught to face? Ourselves. Most men don't realize how much of their identity is built on noise, the noise of achievement, of performance, of being seen. From a young age, we learn that our worth is measured in motion, in doing, winning, fixing, proving, and somewhere along the way we internalize a dangerous belief that stillness is weakness, that silence is failure, that if you're not talking, posting, grinding, you're falling behind. So we fill our lives with distractions: the gym, the job, the jokes, the endless scrolling, the podcasts on double speed, the background music that never stops, all of it designed to keep something buried, something ancient. Because silence doesn't just stop the noise, it exposes the structure behind it. And for many men, that structure is hollow, not because they are hollow, but because the social script handed to them was, think about it. Who taught you how to be a man? Was it your father, who rarely spoke unless it was to correct or command? Was it the locker room, where silence was punished with mockery and vulnerability was a weakness? Was it the workplace, where the quiet man is either feared or forgotten? We weren't taught to sit with ourselves. We were taught to outperform our doubt, to outrun our emotions, to outtalk our pain. But silence doesn't care about your titles or your trophies. Silence doesn't applaud your status. Silence just waits and watches. And in that stillness, the man behind the mask starts to appear. Not the provider, not the protector, not the performer. Just the person. And that's where the fear begins. Because if everything you've built is designed to keep that person hidden, then silence isn't peace, it's exposure. It's the collapse of your persona. It's the return of the self. And returning to yourself is terrifying when you've spent your whole life being someone else. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear to survive. It's not a lie. It's a role, a necessary adaptation, the version of ourselves we present to the world so we can belong, function, be accepted. Every man has one. The confident boss, the funny friend, the tough protector, the calm provider. But Jung also warned that the more we identify with the mask, the more we lose sight of the man underneath. And what lies beneath? The shadow. Not evil, not demonic. Just everything we've exiled. Everything we were told not to be. The softness we buried. The rage we feared. The grief we never named. The fears we mocked. the tenderness we weren't allowed to express. The shadow isn't just darkness. It's truth. And silence is the only space where that truth can be heard. That's why silence is so uncomfortable for many men. Not because it's empty, but because it's full. Full of the parts of ourselves we've pushed into the corners. The parts that don't fit the narrative. The parts that were never safe to show. In a world obsessed with performance, the persona becomes overdeveloped. It hardens. It convinces you that you are only what you do, that your value is tied to utility, that if you're not achieving or producing or impressing, then you're disappearing. But when everything stops, when the world grows quiet, what remains? The shadow does, and the shadow remembers. It remembers the boy who wasn't allowed to cry, the teenager who laughed to hide his panic, the man who became everything to everyone, except to himself. Jung believed that true individuation, true maturity, only happens when a man integrates his shadow, not by fighting it, not by hiding it, but by facing it, listening to it, learning from it. And that process doesn't begin in noise. It begins in silence. The silence we fear is the beginning of wholeness. It's where the persona cracks just enough to let something real emerge. Not the hero, not the warrior, but the human. It starts small. A man wakes up and immediately grabs his phone. Not because there's anything urgent, but because silence feels too loud. He showers, with music on, eats breakfast with the news playing in the background, drives with a podcast filling every inch of the car, and when he gets home, he doesn't sit. He scrolls, he clicks, he consumes. Silence never has a chance. Most of us don't notice it. We just think we're busy, efficient, engaged. But underneath the surface, there's something else happening. We are building walls against stillness, because stillness invites presence, and presence invites truth. There's a moment when the gym is closed, the calls are done, the family is asleep, and the silence returns. That low hum in the soul that says, "You're not okay, and you haven't been for a while." But we push it back down, we turn on a screen, we open another tab, we pour another drink, we joke, we laugh, we distract. Why? Because silence isn't neutral. Silence is a mirror. And for many men, what that mirror shows is unbearable. A man who has built his entire identity around competence finds the silence confronting. It reminds him of how lost he feels when he's not fixing something. A man who prides himself on control finds silence disorienting. It reminds him that not everything can be managed, especially what lives inside him. Even in conversations, we dodge silence. We joke when we should listen. We interrupt when things get too real. We change the subject when someone opens a door to something deeper. We're not trying to be rude. We're just scared. Scared of feeling something we can't control. Scared of saying something we can't take back. Scared of hearing something that will make us see ourselves differently. This fear doesn't come from weakness. It comes from conditioning. We were raised in environments where silence wasn't safety, it was punishment. Where being alone meant being abandoned. Where introspection was seen as indulgence, not strength. And so we learned to outrun silence. But here's the cost. We also outran ourselves, because the truth is, the man you are when no one's watching, that's the real you, and he's been trying to talk to you for years. Through insomnia, through burnout, through that aching feeling that something is missing, even when everything looks right on the outside. He speaks in silence, and all he's asking is to be heard. There's a myth we've all inherited. The strong, silent man, stoic, composed, unshakable. A man who keeps to himself, speaks only when necessary, and never lets emotion cloud his judgment. We've been told that this kind of man is the ideal, that silence in him is a sign of strength. But that myth comes with a price. Because when silence is taught as strength, vulnerability is mistaken for weakness. Reflection is seen as fragility, and emotional honesty becomes Dangerous. It's a quiet kind of violence. The kind that tells men, if you're struggling, stay silent. If you're hurting, don't speak. If you're lost, pretend you're not. And so, many men do. They sit in their cars a little longer before going inside. They stare at the ceiling at night, unable to sleep. They avoid conversations that might crack the surface. They drink in silence. They work in silence. They suffer in silence. But suffering in silence isn't strength, it's abandonment. Abandonment of the self. Modern wellness culture hasn't helped much either. It tells men to meditate, to be mindful, to embrace stillness. But it rarely prepares them for what that stillness actually reveals. You tell a man to sit quietly for 10 minutes a day, and he might try. But when he does, and the silence starts showing him what he's buried, his grief, his shame, his fear, there's no framework to help him hold it. So he thinks he's doing it wrong. He blames himself for not feeling peaceful in the silence when what he's actually feeling is honest. We've confused suppression with control. We've mistaken avoidance for mastery. Even in the world of personal development, men are often taught to conquer their inner world the same way they were taught to conquer the outer one, with domination, discipline, willpower. But the inner world doesn't respond to domination, it responds to presence, to attention, to silence, not as avoidance but as intimacy. There's a huge difference between the silence of disconnection and the silence of truth. One is numbness, the other is revelation. The popular image of the quiet man is incomplete. It tells only half the story, because real masculine strength isn't about being silent in the face of feeling. It's about having the courage to feel in the silence. That kind of silence, brave, raw, unfiltered, isn't weakness, it's healing. And it's in that silence, finally, that a man begins to hear something sacred, his own voice. Not the one he crafted for the world, but the one that's been whispering all along. It took me years to understand that the silence I feared wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to return me to myself. We live in a world that rewards noise, rewards certainty, rewards the man who always knows what to say, what to do, how to move. But what if the most important things a man needs to hear can't be shouted? What if the truth he's starving for only arrives in a whisper? For a long time, I thought the silence was mocking me, showing me all the things I hadn't achieved, all the wounds I hadn't healed, all the versions of myself I couldn't face. But then something changed. I stopped resisting it. Just for a moment, I didn't fill the space. I didn't reach for distraction. I let the silence in, not as an enemy, but as a companion. And in that space, something shifted. I didn't find answers. I found presence. I didn't find control. I found compassion. Not the kind you offer to others, the kind you offer to the boy you once were, the man you are now, the parts you've kept hidden because you thought no one would understand, including yourself. That's when I realized silence is not a void. It's a mirror. And if you're brave enough to look into it, really look, you'll see more than your reflection. You'll see the parts of you that never had words, the ones that ache in your chest but never make it to your lips. You'll see the man you've been running from, and the man you were always meant to become. Because integration doesn't happen in motion. It happens in pause. It happens when the performance stops, when the mask slips, when there's no one left to impress. That's when the soul speaks, and it doesn't speak in language. It speaks in memory, in feeling, in the slow unfolding of what's true. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Silence is where that unconscious begins to surface, and yes, it's terrifying, but it's also the beginning of freedom. Because once you stop fearing your own silence, you start hearing your own life. Maybe silence was never the enemy. Maybe it Was the only place I could hear what the noise was drowning out all along, that I was tired, not just physically, but soul tired. Tired of performing, tired of pretending, tired of carrying a version of myself that looked strong on the outside but felt hollow when the applause stopped. And maybe you are too. There's a silence that isolates, but there's also a silence that heals. The first one feels like exile, the second feels like home. I won't tell you to meditate, or to journal, or to get in touch with your inner self. Not because those things don't matter, but because before any practice, what a man really needs is permission. Permission to stop, to breathe, to not have all the answers, to not have to prove his worth through words or achievements or smiles that don't reach the eyes. Silence isn't something to conquer, it's something to enter, and on the other side of that silence, you may not find peace right away, but you might find something deeper. Your own voice, the one that doesn't perform, the one that doesn't compete, the one that doesn't need validation to feel real. So if the silence feels loud, unbearable, even cruel, it's okay. That means you're getting close. Don't run from it. Sit with it. And when you're ready, listen. Because that voice you hear, it's not your fear. It's not your failure. It's you coming home. If this spoke to something quiet inside you, consider subscribing, leave a like, and if you feel called, support this space with a donation on Ko-fi. It helps us keep building a place where men can be heard without having to shout. Thank you for staying till the end.